The latest revelation sent shockwaves through the heart of Los Angeles and tore through the walls of the Forrester estate like a storm. Taylor Hayes, long known for her strength, her principles, and her unshakable grace, found herself crumbling in the face of an all-too-familiar betrayal. Rich Forrester, her once partner, her sometime soulmate, the man whose love she had fought for and forgiven time and again, had once more thrown himself, both literally and emotionally, into saving Brooke Logan. The image was everywhere. Ridge diving into the water, pulling Brooke into his arms, their bodies tangled in urgency and raw emotion, the press labeling it a rescue romance. Taylor saw it all unfold, saw the confirmation that Ridge would always choose Brooke, no matter how many second chances Taylor gave him. And this time, something in her finally broke. But pain doesn't always lead to silence. Sometimes it leads to fire. And in Taylor's case, it led her straight into the arms of a man who knew what heartbreak looked like, Nick Marone. Nick had just suffered his own devastating blow. What was supposed to be a symbolic wedding with Brooke at the Marone estate had turned into a nightmare. An anonymous threat derailed the ceremony, turning a moment of joy into a day shadowed by fear and confusion. And just when he thought they had overcome the worst, Ridge showed up and pulled Brooke back into his orbit with nothing more than a heroic leap and a few soaked declarations. Brooke didn't say yes to Ridge, but she didn't say no either. The tension in her eyes said everything. Nick could see it. So could Taylor. What started as a quiet conversation over shared pain quickly ignited into something deeper. They met late at night, in the garden behind the estate, far from the ears of the Forresters and the ever-watching press. Taylor, usually composed and clinical, was raw. Nick, usually brash and cocky, was silent. They didn't need many words. They both knew what it meant to be the second choice. They both knew the sting of watching Brooke and Ridge fall back into each other like clockwork. That night, as the city lights flickered across the ocean, Taylor reached for Nick. He didn't pull away. Two broken hearts collided, and something dangerous was born. What began as comfort quickly turned into something else. Nick and Taylor weren't just licking wounds. They were discovering a chemistry that had always been lurking beneath the surface. Old memories resurfaced. Glances became touches. By the time dawn arrived, the bond was sealed. They didn't announce it. They didn't post about it. But the shift was undeniable. Everyone at Forrester Creations could feel it, especially when Taylor walked into the design studio 2 days later wearing Nick's signature chain beneath her blouse. Ridge noticed. So did Brooke. At first, they thought it was a ploy, a rebound, a performance, something to provoke jealousy. But it wasn't. Taylor didn't hide. She didn't play games. She made it clear. She was done waiting for Ridge, done pretending there was anything left to salvage. Nick backed her up, publicly and privately. When Steffy questioned her mother's judgment, Taylor didn't blink. "I deserve someone who chooses me first," she said. And when Hope asked Nick if he was serious about Taylor, he simply replied, "More serious than Brooke ever was about me." But what started as an emotional shift quickly spiraled into a political one. Nick, though long-distanced from the Marone empire, still held substantial power in the shipping world. Taylor, with her credentials, connections, and fierce sense of ethics, began to suggest changes in the business landscape. Together, they started drawing up plans, philanthropic partnerships, psychological wellness initiatives for industry workers, joint ventures that merged psychology and logistics in a way that baffled and impressed investors alike. They weren't just a couple. They were building an empire. And that made people nervous. Eric Forrester was the first to voice concern. "Nick is unpredictable," he told Ridge. "Taylor's judgment may be clouded by emotion. We don't know what they're planning." But Ridge couldn't focus. Every time he saw Taylor with Nick, something inside him tightened. He wasn't supposed to care, not anymore. He had Brooke. Or he almost did. But the image of Taylor smiling up at Nick, laughing in a way she hadn't in years, haunted him. He wasn't used to being on the outside. And now he was. Watching his two great loves slip away in opposite directions. Bill Spencer, meanwhile, watched the whole situation unfold with increasing suspicion. Spencer Publications had ongoing shipping contracts with Marone Global. Nick and Taylor's partnership could jeopardize those deals. Worse, their growing influence over younger Forrester staff, especially through Thomas and Steffy, meant the Spencer-Forrester axis was under threat. He called in Liam and Wyatt. "Keep your eyes open," he ordered. "If Taylor and Nick consolidate, we could lose more than market share. We could lose the narrative." And the narrative was shifting. Tabloids picked up the story. The psychologist and the captain. Taylor's Marone move. Revenge romance or power play? Photos of Taylor and Nick at charity galas, holding hands at board meetings, leaving exclusive restaurants began flooding gossip sites. Brooke's name was always mentioned, but not in the way she was used to. She was no longer the center of the triangle. She was now the ex, twice removed. And that realization cut deep. She confronted Taylor at Forrester, expecting a blowout, but what she got was worse, dignity. Taylor didn't gloat. She didn't jab. She simply said, "I'm not fighting you anymore. Nick makes me feel seen. That's all I've ever wanted." Brooke, taken aback, realized the power had shifted. The relationship had ripple effects everywhere. Steffy and Thomas were split. Steffy supported her mother's happiness, but worried about Nick's influence. Thomas, however, was fascinated. He admired Nick's boldness and even began drafting designs inspired by Marone's nautical history. "This is fresh," he told Hope. "It's different. And it's real." Ridge, trying to hold the family together, found himself isolated. His indecision had cost him both women. And now, the balance of power was no longer in his hands. As weeks passed, Nick and Taylor formalized their partnership. Both romantically and professionally. They announced a new initiative, a joint foundation targeting mental health services for coastal workers and veterans. The media loved it. Investors lined up. Even Zend expressed interest in helping design promotional materials. What had started as comfort had become a brand, a message, a movement. But not everyone was clapping. Grace, still hiding secrets at the hospital, saw an opportunity. She approached Bill with intel that could damage Nick's credibility, an old court settlement involving one of his freighters, buried in international red tape. If leaked, it could embarrass the Marone name just as Nick tried to reinvent it. Bill, always looking for leverage, took the file. He didn't act yet, but he knew power when he saw it shifting, and he intended to stay ahead of it. Meanwhile, Taylor and Nick pushed forward. They traveled. They negotiated. They loved. And in private, away from the noise, they began to consider something neither of them had dared mention in years: marriage. Not symbolic. Not emotional. Legal. Real. "I never thought I'd do this again," Taylor whispered one night. Nick kissed her hand. "Neither did I. But we're not the same people anymore." And that was true. They weren't. They were harder, wiser, more focused. And now, they weren't interested in waiting for anyone's approval. What came next would not just redefine the power dynamics of the Forrester and Spencer families, it would redraw the map of who held influence in Los Angeles itself. Because Taylor and Nick weren't just together. They were unstoppable. But power doesn't grow in silence. It attracts attention, enemies, and agendas. As Taylor and Nick's alliance deepened, their visibility exploded. They became the headline, not the footnote. Forrester Creations began to feel the tremor. Steffy, trying to maintain a neutral stance, soon realized neutrality wasn't an option anymore. When Taylor announced a joint mental health and fashion initiative, pairing Forrester's design platform with her and Nick's new foundation, Eric and Ridge were blindsided. The proposal had never gone through the usual board channels. Thomas was all in. Zend showed interest. Even Hope said it had potential. But Ridge saw the writing on the wall. Taylor wasn't asking Forrester for permission. She was extending influence. Nick was leveraging her name to make Marone relevant again. Behind closed doors, Eric confronted Taylor. "You're using your name, your children, and our company to rebuild Nick's empire," he said. But Taylor didn't flinch. "This isn't about Nick. This is about doing something meaningful for people who don't live in boardrooms." Eric tried to warn her, "You're underestimating how fast alliances change in this town." She replied coldly, "No. I'm just no longer afraid of that." Meanwhile, Ridge stewed. He couldn't stop watching them, Taylor and Nick, in every social post, every gala, every press event. What stung more was that she seemed happy. Genuinely. Not performing, not proving anything. Just being. He saw the way she looked at Nick, open, assured, and trusting. It was everything Ridge could never quite hold onto with her. Brooke wasn't unaffected either. She watched Ridge watching Taylor, and for the first time, saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of losing Brooke, but of losing control. She confronted him. "Is this about her? Or about the fact that she finally stopped waiting for you?" Ridge denied it, but the truth was written all over his face. But not everyone was celebrating Taylor and Nick's rise. Bill Spencer made his move. He leaked documents about the international freight violations involving a Marone ship. Hidden for years, quietly settled with no admission of guilt, but plenty of suspicion. The media pounced. Headlines screamed, "Marone scandal resurfaces. Is Nick hiding a darker past?" Taylor was blindsided. She demanded answers from Nick, who admitted the truth. It had happened years ago, under his father's shadow, and he had paid to make it disappear rather than let it drag on in court. It was business, Nick said. Nothing illegal. But it was ugly. Taylor felt betrayed. "You should have told me." Nick replied, "I didn't want it to taint what we're building." The fallout was immediate. Donors pulled out from their foundation. Forrester board members began to question Taylor's judgment. Ridge saw an opening and moved in, suggesting Forrester suspend any collaborations with Nick until the investigation was complete. Steffy resisted at first, but pressure mounted. Taylor was forced to step back from the campaign she'd spent months building. But she didn't crumble. Instead, she pivoted. With help from Finn, who had long admired her work in psychology, Taylor began a new venture independent of Forrester or Marone, a treatment center focused on trauma care for children of high-profile families. Finn offered medical support. Thomas designed the branding. And Nick, humbled, agreed to help fund it quietly, without headlines or press. It wasn't about reputation anymore. It was about rebuilding trust. Meanwhile, the anonymous saboteur who had once sent the threatening email to Brooke and Nick's wedding reappeared. Another email surfaced, this time targeting Taylor directly. "You don't belong in this family. You're making enemies you can't see." It was signed with a simple letter, M. Investigators traced the signal back to an old server once linked to Sheila Carter, but no definitive proof emerged. Brooke, surprisingly, stepped in to warn Taylor. "If someone's coming for you, they're going to come for your children too." For the first time in a long time, the two women were on the same side, not allies, but not enemies either. Just survivors of too many wars. Then came the twist no one saw coming. Nick proposed. Not a symbolic gesture. A real, legally binding proposal. Quiet at sunset, on the edge of a cliff outside Montecito. Taylor didn't answer right away. Not because she didn't love him, but because she knew what it meant. A marriage to Nick wouldn't just be a personal commitment. It would be a public declaration of independence, from Ridge, from the Forrester name, from the years of emotional hostage-taking. Days passed. She told no one. Not Steffy, not Thomas. She only confided in Brooke. The two met privately at Brooke's cabin. Taylor, for once, didn't come with judgment. Just honesty. "If I say yes, everything changes," she said. Brooke responded quietly, "Maybe that's what you need." The past between them was full of betrayals, But in that moment, there was something new, mutual respect. Taylor returned to Montecito the next evening. Nick was waiting. No speeches. No flowers. Just a simple question. Yes, she said. But on one condition, we do this our way. No press. No politics. Just us. Nick agreed. But Los Angeles wouldn't let them stay quiet for long. The wedding plans, no matter how discreet, were eventually leaked. By an inside source Ridge later suspected was working under Spencer's orders. The announcement hit the media like a thunderclap. Asterisk, Taylor Hayes to marry Nick Marone, wedding to Shake LA elite. Asterisk now, all eyes are on the guest list. Will Ridge attend? Will Brooke give her blessing? Will Bill attempt to crash the ceremony with another revelation? And who is M, the mysterious threat that looms like a ghost over everything? One thing is certain. Taylor and Nick's love story has become more than just another romance. It's a reckoning. And when that wedding day arrives, it won't just be two people at the altar. It'll be the culmination of years of betrayal, survival, and the long, painful road to choosing oneself over history. And if the Forrester and Spencer families can't adapt to the new balance of power, they'll soon learn. Taylor and Nick aren't asking for permission anymore. They're rewriting the rules.